This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 164.
Welcome to We the SEs podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE family? Welcome back to another podcast episode. So, we've been talking to a lot of SEs, we've talked to CEOs, we've talked to a lot of different people, let's just put it that way. And today's guest is someone we've talked to in the past. His name is Gary Sloper. He was on show 115. If you want to hear his history and where he got to where he is, go check that out. And he was formerly a leader in Oracle, high up there. Although if you talk to him, you would never be able to tell because he's so, he's just a guy. He's just a normal guy. He doesn't make you feel like he's better than you or anything like that, that's why one of the reasons I love talking to Gary. The reason I wanted to get him back on is now he's taken a different approach. He left Oracle and he started his own business. He saw something in the pre-sales market. So he saw a trend and he's doing something about it. He's modifying the way pre-sales works, at least the way he thinks it should work. So that's what we dig into it, why he actually started his own company and how he went about doing pre-sales. He's not doing a product. There's several sales engineers or former sales engineers or former salespeople who left and created a product or did training. He's doing something completely different. So how about we just hear it from him, what he actually does, and I will see you in the outro. All right, what's up, Gary? How are you doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good. This is the longest conversation I've had before a podcast, and now we're going to repeat everything we said.
I know. We're going to have to do it all over again. I usually, you kind of have like that awkward ending, like you're trying to rush to the next meeting, but there's still a lot of things that you want to say. So I'm glad actually we got to catch up beforehand.
Yeah, no, this was great. So you've been on the show 115, and you go by the name of Gary Sloper, correct?
I do. Yes. I've been called a lot worse things, but I go by Gary Sloper.
Okay. Do you mind just reminding the folks listening, or for those who didn't catch show 115, go back and watch it, but could you remind us who you are and what's changed since then?
Yeah. So I think we were just joking about this. So when I was on last time, I was still working for Oracle, running pre-sales. And I think literally maybe right after you posted that, I left Oracle and started Macronet Services with a couple other colleagues of mine in the industry, and which is a big jump. So I've been in traditional corporate America for many years. So I ran pre-sales at Oracle. I came into Oracle through an acquisition company called Dyn. Before that, I spent about 10 years at CenturyLink, now Lumen, running pre-sales there. And then before that, I was at a couple other smaller, well, I should say Quest, which was then acquired by CenturyLink. So I've gone through a lot of acquisition, and then some other smaller entities and larger entities. So I've always been in pre-sales, but now I'm basically doing pre-sales full time, both solution designing for customers on their behalf, and then it's funny when you leave one of those roles. So when I left Oracle, everybody was like, "What are you going to go do?" And I told them what I was going to go do, and so I still get called probably on a weekly basis. Hey, can you come run pre-sales for us? So I've chosen not to do that full time, but I do advise a lot of pre-sales organizations, a lot of SEs as well, or folks looking to get into the SE world. And I've had a small podcast out there, but I'm in big trouble because I'm terrible about updating content and other things. Because literally, when you make this idea of, hey, I want to go start my own company, always looks great. Everybody says it's the hardest thing to do, but it is hard. Like, you are hustling 24/7. So that other things like podcasts and material kind of get put to the wayside, but we're almost out of that, and hopefully we'll come back. But yeah, that's a little bit about me, and I think what's changed since the last time.
Okay, so first off, your podcast is very important. I told you this off air. It's very important in terms of getting new business, so you should work on that.
You sound like our marketing guy. Yeah, I know. You're absolutely right, though. You're right, because people, when they do a search or they hear a reference or they see it in the signature line, right? You're absolutely right.
So I wanted to talk to you for a couple of different reasons. Yeah, you mentioned right now you're a solution architect for customers. So you work with customers and with sales teams, right? So I wanted to talk about, you're from the other side now. how does it work now that you're a customer advocate? Not that SEs aren't, but generally speaking, they also have to work for their company. How do you balance working with customers and working with sales teams now?
Yeah, so it's like basically being a solution engineer, customer success manager, a salesperson, a procurement person, and I wouldn't say an attorney, but somebody that can navigate MSAs pretty well. So today I'm actually at a customer site. I know it hasn't really happened to a lot of people, but we have, wearing masks. So what's different is, instead of me working at Oracle or CenturyLink, where you still had a slew of other products, whether it was, traditional networking or all the way up to, IaaS-based services. What's interesting now is that you're really working on behalf of the company. So if you think about a lot of organizations, even as SEs, when they come to us and they want to see a demo or evaluate a product, it's the first time that they've had to go down that path, maybe ever, with you as a company or as a technology refresh. Maybe it's, month 12 or 24 or 36. So they're not doing this every day. So we as SEs, we have that cadence. But what's more challenging now is we have to be more responsible for other vendor technologies, so we can advise the customers, hey, I know that you really want to go take a look at this, but I think based on your use case, we may want to design it this, and this way. And so what we're doing is we're helping customers on their behalf, almost acting as an extension of their team to then interface with the sales engineers and account teams in a much more expeditious fashion to get to the point, whether it's, the design, the price, those types of things. But I also think it takes the customer burden off, because what I've noticed over the last 20 years being in pre-sales is while companies have grown and developed, the pace of the amount of, I would say, technology buyers is not the same as it is for technology producers. So we've seen more SaaS companies come about. We've seen more IT consulting come about. So they're all trying to sell to the same buyers, same number of buyers. So what's happened is those buyers are extremely product fatigued. So the whole pre-sales industry has completely changed and is continuing to morph. Those organizations that haven't adjusted as well, we're there to basically tell them to adjust quickly. Like, this is what the customer needs. Like, we don't need, the 20-page marketing slide deck. Like, this is the technology. We've already vetted this. It's come over the fence to you. We've already qualified what their use case and pain points are. And customers appreciate that, because they're not having to at all times go in through a website to say, all right, I want to get a demo. Like, we're able to help them kind of navigate which demo that is, or which provider or product that is right away. And that's the most rewarding thing. So I get to design across a lot of other technologies versus just being at a company with my own product team. But there's nothing wrong with that. I did it for 20 years, but now I get to pick and choose where I want to play in the solution design space. And I think that intertwines really nicely from a customer success standpoint. So if I design something really great, we throw great customer success and account stewardship on that. Then coming out of it, when account teams turn over and the customer says, hey, abc.com, my SaaS provider that you worked on, the account team's turned over, we're still the constant. So I get to own that customer journey as well, from pre-sales into post-sales.
Okay. It's funny. We just did a fireside chat for Vivint about owning the entire customer journey. So it's interesting that you just mentioned that. So in terms of I
didn't want to, it wasn't about my, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, please.
I was going to say, to that point, it wasn't about really more of us, but it was interesting timing, because, that was some of the conversations we had. And I thought, and I look at companies like Vivint and others that are, helping, elevate what pre-sales is, and even, your podcast, for example, because so many organizations, when I've built these teams in the past, you really have to know how to navigate the financial ask with a CFO or finance teams on building out pre-sales, because it's always an afterthought. So, I think that fireside chat was great.
Yeah. So about your current role, like, you're working with so many different vendors. What you're doing, basically, if I understand you correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you're kind of funneling the information that the customer needs to know. You did the discovery call, you understand their requirements, and then you went and talked to all the different vendors and followed that information, correct?
Correct.
Okay. How are you keeping up with learning about all these different vendors? Because, let's just stop there. How do you keep up with learning?
Yeah, I was waiting for you to ask me that. So we spend a lot of hours a month through technical trainings with the various vendors that we're partnered with. It's just, what I'll never do, because I've never liked this when I ran pre-sales teams, I'll never deposition an SE at a vendor, unless they're really out of left field. But our job is, I would say, I don't want to say the old adage of, enough to be dangerous, but really understand the technology at its core. We're not going to know every single nuance or the immediate, next sprint cycle that's going to fix something in that platform. But if a customer says, hey, I want to go to Okta to get an MPLS network, like, we know right off the bat, they don't offer those types of things. They're in a whole different space. So we'll sit down with the customer and kind of, walk them through that initial pre-sales journey to understand what are they trying to fix, accomplish, or avoid. And then be able to look at that and, based on our learnings, make some initial assessments. And sometimes you may get it wrong, right? Just like anything in pre-sales, we may find out, this vendor can't meet the objectives that the customer needs. And so being able to articulate that back to the customer, not necessarily in a price. I mean, anybody can say, hey, they cost more, but it's really like, what are the work streams, or what is the product capabilities or lack thereof that would prevent you as a customer from consuming this, and articulate that. So we spend a lot of time. We have to go through certifications, vendor certifications, those types of things. I surround myself with the pre-sales teams. So if I'm having to work with the same vendor a couple times, I will absolutely pull an SE aside versus, somebody in the channel or a salesperson or a product person, and just pick their brain, and they're more apt to have that conversation with me than somebody else that would ever try to do the same thing for a customer or try to sell them, because they know, my background in the industry. They know, I have this pedigree of being in pre-sales. So there's that kind of level of respect. And at the same time, I don't know everything. So if I do get stuck, I go to that SE and say, hey, this is what the customer's looking for. My thoughts might be X, Y, and Z, but you prove me wrong, or you tell me where I'm way off base. And they like that, right? Versus what sometimes the information that we get thrown over the fence, it's, well, our product stinks, so therefore we got to redesign around it. Well, it's so vague and non-descriptive. Like, how am I supposed to go do that as an SE? So it's definitely something that we're always chasing because there's only 24 hours in the day. So I will, indoctrinate myself on the weekends and anything else. But honestly, Ramsey, I think I would always do that anyway, even when I was on leading teams and I wasn't the engineer anymore. I was more in the managerial role. I still wanted to learn and be knowledgeable enough so I didn't walk in front of a customer and say something out of line. So, it just kind of gets back to that old adage of, being in pre-sales, that you own controlling your learning curve, and your manager, your leadership should help foster that.
Yeah. Okay. And it's now that you've kind of changed roles in a way, and you're working more with the customer, do you feel like your relationship with the customer is different than when you were in a pre-sales leader position or a pre-sales position?
I do. I don't think I ever had poor relationships with customers. I still talk to these same customers that I've worked with for 20 years, and that's what I love. I think what's changed now is because I'm not coming from that one company, they look at us as a true technical advisor to help them. And what I value is customers, I feel, share more information than I ever would have received in the past. Nothing confidential or proprietary. It's just around what they're trying to really do. I mean, what it's like when you have that customer that their arms are folded and you're the third or fourth demo that they've gone through. They're kind of checking the box because they have to. It's corporate policy, and it's hard to have those conversations. I think when I can sit down with a customer and say, look, my job is to help make your life easier, pull some things together, consolidate, allow you to scale, do it in the right technical manner, get a good price for it. What ends up happening is you build that relationship with the customer deeply. And, if there's something that I can't do or I don't have the expertise, and I tell them, and they appreciate that. And what ends up happening is I feel like we've built this relationship with the customer where they view us as a extension of their team. And to me, that's a win. And it doesn't matter what type of business they do. If they just start viewing us as a team member, we've won, in my opinion, in a good way. And I take that extremely seriously. Anybody that's ever worked with me in the past knows how much I value relationships. And if a customer has that kind of trust in me, then my job is to make sure that I can go advocate for them in the industry around, technical solutions. And that may or may not upset vendors, but my job, again, is to protect the relationship with my customer, and I will defend that to the day I die. So that's what's really been interesting in this whole transition. Certainly you have that when you're at a single company or a big company, a small company, but sometimes, again, you just have that one option or that one offering or that one work stream that the customer's partnering with you on, and they trust you in everything in those areas. But I mean, we're doing everything from, we're getting into areas around expense management and other things outside that are not glamorous, but companies need help. And I think if we can continue to do that, it'll just make a better ecosystem, because, I mean, we're not going to hit every customer, but I just think if there's more folks like us, it makes for a better ecosystem overall because they have a good experience. So that to me is what's really changed and been eye-opening.
Do you think that has something to do with the fact that you're your own boss? Like you don't have a boss telling you like sell this thing no matter what. Does that have an effect on your relationship with the customer, or that never affected you before?
Have you met my new boss, my wife? I'm just kidding. I love you, honey. She's the one that I report to on a monthly and quarterly basis. But no, I would say yes, that has changed, right? So I've worked for multiple publicly traded companies. You have a lot of requirements to end month end, quarter end, way orders go in. That all, what customers don't realize at times, that impacts the work stream of how they, contract with you. And then on the smaller companies, it's whether you're scaling or trying to keep the lights on. So it is definitely changed. I mean, I feel that that's a burden that I've removed from customers as well, is that they're seeing me as their advocate, but I'm not advocating just for me or my business. It's more around what can we do for them. So if they need to wait until June 1st versus May 31st to make that decision, I might advise them on that. Or knowing how some of these vendors could be based on some of the background that I know, I might advise them wait till the last day of the month. You may get a better opportunity or a better deal, or we might be able to get that product feature added to the roadmap faster because you're pulling through a large opportunity for them. And nobody wants to have those conversations. You don't have to be a bad guy about it, but I can articulate that back into a business format, because I've had to do this so many times on the vendor side, that I could say, listen, this is what the customer's asking for. You're claiming you want to be a partner. They're saying they will do this. You need to add this in the sprint cycle. In exchange, they will sign at the end of the month. And for customers, again, if they're only doing and buying on an infrequent basis, that's not in their comfort zone. So, you could probably relate to it too. You've had many probably good and bad experiences with customers. You kind of build up that thick skin. So if I can go and help take some of that burden off of them and just do it in a nice, professional manner, everybody wins, right? And everybody's on the same page. So yeah, I would say the monthly and quarterly, mad dash to close business, it's not there. I mean, certainly I do feel the pressure at times from vendors because they're feeling pressure from their upper management. And so I'm able to have a different conversation with them. And, listen, hey, Ramsey, I know you're trying to close at the end of the month or the end of the quarter. However, you all along have not met these 3 obstacles that I've asked you to do, or the customer's asked you to do. You can't go back to the customer on this at this point. Like, you own this. And that's a little liberating, because how many times have you been in a sales cycle and you just want to tell the sales team, listen, you guys didn't do a good job of preparing for this, and now you're going to tell the customer that their deal or their pricing goes away if they don't sign today versus tomorrow.
Oh, even worse when the VP of sales calls you and tell, hey, give him like a 50% discount and see what happens. Close the deal, no matter what. It's like, I can give him a 50% discount right now and close the deal at 50% discount, or I can wait till the next quarter and get it full price. No, do the 50% discount. So yeah, that never happens.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think in the customers, the CIOs I've worked with, they've been around the block. They kind of know how that game works. I think where we've become, more self-service in this cloud native world, a lot of things are point and click. And I think a lot of that mentality that you're talking about of mad dash or, doing things that you should have just been upfront with customers on around pricing up front. This is why a lot of customers have just liked the cloud model. Like, I see my price, I see what the elasticity will be as I utilize it. Therefore, I'm going to click, and I don't have to have the human element. But you and I also know that you need that human element, especially in the pre-sale side, to make sure that whatever you clicked on is actually going to work, and you just didn't overspend. So there's that happy medium. But I think when I look at when I got in the industry 20 years ago, it's changed significantly. Are we there yet? As a cohesive sales organization? No, not yet, but we're getting there.
Okay. And talking about from the other direction, now you're working with sales teams. I know you have your thoughts about what's a good sales engineer and good salesperson is as an SE manager, but now as a customer, how has that changed, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, so, I'm an individual. I have zero ego. Anybody that knows me knows that, when I had VP roles, people were like, hey, I didn't know you were the VP. You were, mopping up the floor, after a Christmas party or whatever. I'm like, yeah, just, lead by example, whatever. So, but what's interesting is I also, having awareness in any position, doesn't matter if it's pre-sales or is important. So when I had high positions, I could tell, people that wanted to really work with me or, build a closer relationship was only because of my title and my role and those types of things. So you kind of see through that. What's interesting is now that you don't have the title and the big organization and all the other stuff, when you're out there on the street working with organizations, if I don't know them, they're just like, I don't care who you are or what you were before, but I just see you as an obstacle to close my deal with the same customer. So that's kind of interesting. I kind of chuckle. I don't get offended by it because, like I said, I don't really care. I'd rather build relationships on, if Gary's a nice person or not versus if Gary had a big title or a small title. But I think that's definitely interesting watching that change. And some people that do know me, but if they're bringing in somebody that didn't know me with some of the vendors, I think they're kind of surprised because they're like, hey, Gary, I remember you when you were VP. Now you're back to being an SC. Why are you doing that? Like, why'd you go backwards? I'm like, no, I didn't go backwards. I'm going forwards. This is where the industry's going.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, but you could go, work at this company and, have a big organization. I'm like, I did that for many years. I like going to help people and I see the whole industry changing and I'm going to be a part of that. So that's why I'm doing this. This has nothing to do with me going backwards. This is 100% forwards. So that's what's interesting. And I've always tried to stay on the forefront of how our industry has continued to change. And I just think this is just the next step. And, 5 years from now, people will say, hey, Gary had it right. Like, kind of built an organization that's solution design and customer success focused. Well, that was brilliant. Or maybe I'll look at 5 years and people will be like, that was the dumbest move ever. He should have just, gone to another company. But I don't think that'll be the case.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think. You mentioned that the industry is changing towards more like services and customer success. When did you start feeling like that? And what signs did you see that made you make that conclusion?
This is probably a long, I could spend an hour talking about this, but in short, what I would say, in short, I saw probably about 5 years ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago, when organizations, and some of them still exist today, felt like we're the number one, we're the 800-pound gorilla in hardware and services, we're not changing. I knew that was eventually going to come to fruition to be could be a problem. And as cloud, kind of use that as a loose word, right? Whether it's PaaS, SaaS, or IaaS, started coming together. That's when I knew that the old way of buying and selling and designing for companies would change. And what I think was the biggest turning point for me in my career was when I watched organizations still try to build organizations around that, and it impacted employees, and I couldn't help protect that. That's when I started to take exception and decided that I knew I was going to have to make a change. So org changes, other things, compensation, how we support customers, and the customers ended up, feeling the brunt of it. So I started thinking about this for a lot of years. I'm always trying to think ahead, and as I started building future organizations, that's what I was focused on. I was focused on, hey, just because you're an SC doesn't mean you couldn't understand the customer success motion, or just because you're in customer success doesn't mean you shouldn't have some understanding of the product that we're supporting, and trying to tie those together. And, I think the organizations that get that today are the ones that are really starting to have the rising tides of being successful. And the folks that are like, well, our SEs, they only do this one function, or our CS teams only do this one function. I think, they haven't figured that out because they're afraid to make that change. And I think anytime you're in a leadership role in organizations, and I advise a lot of companies around this, like I said, I still talk to SEs and help build SE organizations on the side for some folks. I tell them, like, you always have to be open to those types of changes. Doesn't matter what your friend down the street is doing who's got the same role as you. You got to look out what's best for your customers and always be open to that, and build a team around you that can help you recognize that. So I look back to the CenturyLink days, like when I had probably, I think, 12, 14 directors. So I had a team of about 250 people or so. And those directors came from all different walks of life, all had different opinions on how to build the organization. I loved it. It was chaos every week. Like, we get on team calls, because that made me a better leader. So I started realizing back then that, companies needed to be more like that. And I missed those days. So my goal is to continue to try to figure out how to build organizations like that. And it's scary for us SEs or SE leaders, or even the VP of sales or the CROs that think that the SE just exists to do this one function. It's scary for those folks because it's change, and we don't like to change as humans. But if you step out of that and you look at it a little bit differently, I think you'll find that the customers will appreciate how you're trying to be that pre-sales to post-sales kind of support mechanism. Call it customer success, call it solution architecture, whatever it is. At the end of the day, you're designing, implementing, and supporting customers. And that's what, on the buy side that I see now, that's what they all want. They just want somebody that's there when the contract gets signed. Hey, we're all happy, super happy. But then when it's 2 o'clock in the morning and there is an outage because just about everybody has some sort of failure, who's going to be there to help me? And I hope it's my account team. And so that's when I really started realizing that you can't be in silos anymore.
So how do you see the big companies, the 800-pound gorillas, implementing that, or can they implement that?
They can. The answer is, do they want to? I think some companies are so large that they have so many different products that they just need almost like a mini organization that just focuses on those work streams or that service offering, and they can't create it more overarching. I think some big companies, they're so big and they've had so much middle management that the middle management's so worried about how they're going to, get their next stepping stone or something along those lines that ends up impacting the individual contributors down below, the SCs, the CSMs. I think sometimes they're so large that for them to turn the ship, it takes months. So that's difficult. But then at the same time, they have the amount of resources. They have the sales enablement training. They have, the marketing training, and they have all these other things that can kind of get added into writing that ship. So they have, I would say, it's almost like a completely well-balanced balance sheet, if you think of it from an accounting standpoint. So they've got, enough of the bad things to keep them on one side, but enough of the good things to right the ship. So they should be able to balance out, but sometimes they don't. I think the smaller companies, because they're more nimbler, can move really quickly. The problem is you don't want the ship constantly stirring back and forth. And I'm not a seafaring person, so I'm probably not saying bow and everything else starboard correctly. But the challenge is that they're sometimes schizophrenic, right? Like you don't even have an opportunity to let the organization go in one direction long enough to see if it works, because you're being driven by results and who has equity in the company, if it's you're trying to go get additional funding, those types of things. So really I think this is where leadership comes into play, and you need somebody that in teams that can adapt and have that blended experience of big and small company. I think the bigger companies will be forced to make some changes, because what I'm seeing in the pre-sales side, when I first got in, if you were in pre-sales at a company, you stayed at that company for at least 10 years. SEs didn't jump ship. And now SEs, I think there's so much technology out there that interests them, that if the culture and the environment's not built correctly, and what they don't feel like they're accomplishing a lot during the day, it doesn't matter the size of the company, but especially if it's big companies, they'll move on. I'm seeing folks that, came out of, university, after a couple of years, got into an SE role at a big company, and they're jumping ship, and that never would have happened before. And some of my colleagues in the industry are asking me, like, what do I do? Like, how do I make this, fun? And I just kind of break it back, and I'm like, a lot of it has to do, you need to go further up. And I think I think there's still a lot of changes that will happen on the pre-sales side. I think a lot of these organizations are still trying to figure it out, and it's not something that they need to really spend a lot of time on. They just need to set it right and go execute and have that 360 feedback from the pre-sales teams. Because there's nothing worse than if you're in the field and exactly like 3 things that could make your life a lot better, and you don't have an outlet to, I wouldn't say complain, but at least just make some suggestions around how to fix that. That's where a lot of leadership, I've always said, kind of has, a blind eye, because they don't know what goes on the day-to-day, right? So you've got to kind of build that organization to make sure that you can deliver it that way. So I don't know. I think it'll be interesting. I think if anything history kind of tells us anything, that I think pre-sales is the most, pre-sales will be the most sought after role, but I think it has the most ripe for disruption in a good way.
Yep.
And get out of the traditional norm.
Nice. Okay. Like you said, I think we can talk about this for a few more hours, you and I, but it's time to move on to the not so fire round. I've asked you these questions before. Let me bring up what you answered last time to make sure I'm not cheating.
Oh, no. I don't remember what you asked me last time, so this will be interesting.
Okay. So now that you've had your own company and you're working as solution architect, what do you love about that role, working with companies, working with SEs in general?
So what do I love about like being on this side now?
Yep.
I think what I like about being on this side is that I do get exposed to whatever technologies that I want to get exposed to. So I don't have to wait for my company to roll something out. So if I see somebody that's disruptive, I can go spark a relationship there. The challenge is that I also have to temper that. I can't be everything to everyone, but I do like that flexibility. I like the flexibility now of owning my own organization, so I can, I basically can now walk the walk. Right after all these years, I said, hey, if I could go change these 3 things in this company, now I have the ability to go do it. So all the onus falls on me, which I'm okay with, and my partners. So I'd say that's the most rewarding, and the fact that I think the advising of customers is completely different than it was before, which is really, really fun.
Nice. We already touched on it. The second question is, what would you change about your role? But let me modify that. Now that you own your own business, what are you doing differently today than you used to do working for others?
Well, first and foremost, I'm back into the actual pre-sales role of designing, architecting, fact finding, pulling out the pain, sometimes demoing if I need to. I try not to do everything because I never want to deposition a vendor SE, but I do enough of it to at least qualify. And I think that's what customers appreciate. Like I don't have a hidden agenda. It's like, so I think that's what I'm doing differently. The past, I'd say 10 years, building and scaling SE organizations. Yeah, I get to go do that once in a while for the big opportunity. Like that's what I didn't like about management, is I still like to go out and meet customers. And it's like, well, Gary, we don't need you yet. We don't need to have a VP level out there. It's like, yeah, but it's okay. It's abc.com. I want to go meet with them. No, that'll be for our big kahuna, big show at the end. It's like, oh, it's you and the CRO. I'm like, okay. Then I have kind of like a finite responsibility and put into a box. What I do like is I get to roll back up my sleeves and kind of go back to it. And like I said, you don't have an ego about it. Like if I wanted to go back and run big organizations again, I could, but I really like being back on the street a little bit. And that's been rewarding. And I haven't been able to do that for a while.
Okay, good. All right. Question number 3. You talked about learning earlier and getting certifications and all that. Is there a resource that you tend to lean on more to learn about certifications, or do you go like Cisco, you buy Cisco books, or Juniper, you buy Juniper books? How do you do it?
Yeah. So I would say I'll answer that after. I would say non-certification, just industry information or industry kind of published material. I like O'Reilly. I think O'Reilly's got a lot of good cookbooks and other things that you can get up to speed pretty quickly. So I'd say that's where I go to first. When it comes to certifications, I really feel that if folks are looking to get certified in anything, definitely understand how the global internet works, right? So you mentioned Cisco. I think the CCNA, while you're not in telecom, you really should understand how routing and switching should work, because that is one of the biggest pain points that I see DevOps SRE teams today. They do not know how to connect multi-cloud together. They know how to build multi-cloud. They know that my app tier needs to get to my database tier over between clouds, but getting it from point A to point B is really simple. They don't understand that. So I, for something like that, I think it's like a Cisco. And then everything else, it really depends on what you want to get interested in. I mean, all the vendors have some sort of level of understanding or certification. So if you wanted to go to Ring Central or Fuse or somebody like that, on the unified communication side, they have their own certifications. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go figure out how to port telephone numbers over or how to integrate video into Microsoft Teams, but it'll give you enough to be dangerous. And then if you obviously want to advance yourself, you can. I think Amazon obviously on the cloud side has a slew of those. But the other thing, I can't remember the name, on LinkedIn, they have kind of like a mini certification LMS system. I can't think of the name now, and we'll have to post it in the notes. But
Sure.
It's a subscription base, but it's really great because you can get kind of like their certification on business, their certification on cloud, and other things that are important in the industry. And I think that's a good baseline. But I always tell people, and I don't know if I mentioned that, I know you're probably going through my answers, but I think looking back, I think I've always told folks to figure out what they want to be a specialist in, because you can't be, an architect and everything. So if there's one thing, like then, start backwards and figure out, okay, I went to the vendor certification process. Is there anything else in the industry? Pearson does a lot. So it's really across the board, but the other thing too, I love talking to the SEs of those that I'm trying to get an industry certification on. So, it may be hard to get a hold of an AWS SE, but there's enough AWS SE consultants out there. Try to network with them. Ask them, what works well for them too. So that would be kind of my suggestion there.
Yeah. If you're looking to network with an AWS SE consultant, let me know. I know a few through
Okay.
the SEs, so let me know.
All right.
Final question of the not so fire on. What are you working on right now on improving? That's not a way to say it. Let me re-ask that question. Is there a habit you're working on to improve yourself?
Is there a habit I'm working on to improve myself? I'm always trying to improve. I think that's the hardest thing. So I'd say the first thing that I've learned is, so I'll answer that in a second. What I am trying to do is continue to perfect what I'm good at. So if I'm good at, hitting doubles to left field every time, like that's what I'm going to continue to focus on, because I don't want that to go away. And that's my strong suit. So I would tell any SE, and I always advise on this, if you're really good at something, don't lose sight of that, because you are the expert. And it doesn't necessarily have to be technical capabilities. If you're really good at demos or presentations or diagramming or research, whatever that is, never lose sight of that. And then, realize that, okay, there's a lot of things that you're not good at. So try to figure out where to spend the least amount of time, because you just may never, ever be fantastic at those things. So that's what I would do. So for me personally, trying to figure out what I'm focused on now. So where my world's changed a little bit, what I'm trying to focus on, which I've always been excellent at, but for me, it's time management. So I have customers, vendors, other organizations that are always trying to grab my time, whether it's to make sure that I'm in front of a customer doing something, if it's a customer that needs extra things, if it's a vendor that wants to get in good graces with me, so I refer them into an account, whatever that might be, it's time management. So throughout my career, I've been able to manage that, but this one, because it's my company, I have to filter what's coming in. And I think when you're starting out in a startup world, it's really making sure that you can continue to maintain that time management, because what you think may only take you 10 minutes sometimes turns into 20 or 30, because you don't have a huge team behind you. It's all on you. And so I think that's very applicable in the SE world, because when you're working on an opportunity for a customer, if you take on too much, then you're not going to be good to any of your customers. Yeah. So if you think that you're only going to be able to fix, two things, but really you can only fix one, go fix that one first. It's better to ask for help for the other one. So I think for me, it's just maintaining time management.
Okay. All right.
How'd I do?
I think you did great.
Okay.
Time management is something that everybody struggles with, I think.
Yeah.
Especially
and it's hard now, right? I can't imagine that the new SEs are crushing time management, only because they're set up for failure right now in COVID. Everybody's going to schedule a 30 or a 1 hour call. And so if you think about during the day, when you used to work in an office, you could walk by, have a quick conversation, get something, ask a quick question. You can't do that now. Now you have to put it on somebody's calendar. And so if you are working an 8 or 9 hour day, at most you're going to have, I'd say at least maybe eight meetings, right? Or eight slots available. I don't know when you have a bio break or have lunch and take a mental break. So that is the hardest part. And I don't think it's an SE thing. I think everybody's struggling with that, but you really got to maintain that. Is that 1 hour call required with the customer? Is it something that you can accomplish in 15 minutes? Because if you go to them, and this is what I do, if you go to them and say, hey, listen, I think we can nail this in 15 minutes, and you give them 15 minutes back, you just made their day.
Yeah. Yeah. And like on Outlook, you can actually make the calendar per 5 minutes. So look in 5-minute chunks, and I can book 5-minute meetings with someone. So if I just needed to jump on a call and it's a 5-minute call, I'm not going to book an hour. And it pisses me off when someone books an hour with me just to have a 5-minute conversation, and then they don't know how to end the call because they booked for an hour. So
right.
Yeah. All right. Last question of the day. If people want to reach out and chat with you, Gary, where can they do that?
Yeah, I think the best thing is always on LinkedIn. They can reach out to me there. We'll be getting some more content out, on the Solutions for Customers podcast. But LinkedIn, I'm on that quite often because I just interact with a lot of different people that way. You can certainly do that, and then I can follow up on email or anything like that. But yeah, I'd say LinkedIn's the easiest way. It's just G Sloper, SLOPER on LinkedIn.
Yeah, so we'll have a link to that in the show notes. And thanks. This was great, and hope to talk to you again soon because can't get enough.
Yeah, likewise. No, I'm honored to be on. So thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I really enjoyed talking to Gary. We actually talked for a while after. He's just that kind of guy. You want to talk to him all day. And let me know what you guys thought. Like, he sees the world as in, we need people who are the go-between between customers and vendors. And there are the value-added resellers, but that's not how he functions. He's not trying to sell anything. He's trying to solve a problem for his customers. He works for the customer. He doesn't work for the vendor. And the way value-added resellers, I feel they work is they work for the vendor. So he's taking a different approach, and which I find very interesting. And I hope the best for Gary and his team, and hopefully he grows and becomes very successful. So let me know what you guys think. Where do you see the future of the industry going? Not like whether it's high tech, just in terms of pre-sales. Where do you see it going? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter, we the SEs at Twitter, and let me know what you guys think. And if you haven't checked out the website, do check it out, WeTheSalesEngineers.com. We have a lot of different information on there. I feel like I'm selling myself to people who are already listening to me, so it's kind of weird. So just check it out. Share this podcast with people you think would be interested. And if other people are looking to go the same route as Gary, let me know. I may be able to connect you guys. And how about we just end there? So with that, this is Ramsey signing off.